In half an hour, Kemi Badenoch will make her speech to the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. After its worst ever election result, the party has sunk even further in the polls. Has she got what it takes to turn it around? Hello, I'm Vicky Young and welcome to Politics Live. Joining me today, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Nadhim Zahawi and Times columnist and a recent joiner to the Tories, Matthew Syed. Kemi Badenoch will put the economy at the heart of her message with a plan to cut government spending, borrowing and taxes. But will voters be listening? If you've got a view about that story or any other, remember it's your BBC News, so we want to hear your voice. Get in touch using the details on screen now. So Kemi Badenoch preparing to make that speech to her party conference, the first one that she will deliver as party leader. Nadhim, how much of a challenge is this for her, given the state of the polls and the state of the Tory party?
It is a challenge, clearly. I mean, look, she inherited a distressed brand, if we can describe the party as that, after the debacle. I remember I was at the table, at the cabinet table. I think I had more jobs just hopping around the cabinet table in about 6 months than I've had hot dinners. So it was pretty clearly a difficult time. The nation hasn't yet forgotten. You've got to also remember, and I was a pollster before entering politics, that people have given their vote, they've exercised their franchise to Labour. They're not ready yet to sort of begin to think about the Conservatives. Plus, it's difficult to cut through when you've got someone who is a very good communicator in Nigel Farage. And historically, the sort of two-party system worked quite well. You're in power, you make mistakes, you lose power, you go out and try and sort of rediscover why you want to be in power, whilst the other lot make mistakes, and then people have forgotten by the time of maybe a couple of rounds of elections, and you're back in. The problem now is that she doesn't have that luxury. You've got reform with Nigel being able to give analyse a problem and give a solution that, to the average Brit, sounds pretty credible. He knows where his weaknesses are. His weakness is he hasn't got a team. And I noticed Kemi punching that quite hard all of this week. But it's no easy task, and I wish her luck today.
Matthew, since the last time you were on this programme, you've joined the Conservative Party. Some would say you're going against the tide in many ways. Well, why now?
That's definitely true. The way you said it in that intro, it's like I'd contracted some kind of a disease. No, that's not fair. But that has been the way it's been characterised by some of my friends and colleagues
in the lobby
and so on. But perhaps a bit of context, if I may, briefly. I stood for Labour in 2001 on the Blair Manifesto, and I'm proud to have stood on that manifesto because it seemed to me a rational and sensible manifesto. It's difficult to remember now, but debt to GDP in 2001 was 30%. The highest marginal tax rate was 40p. Government spending was lower. The tax take was lower. Since then, debt has ballooned out of control. It's now 100% of GDP and rising. And because of that, the amount of money we're paying to service the debt interest is more than we are spending on the education budget. This is not a symptom of our problem. This is the problem. Taxes have risen. Regulations have gone up. The tax code is now the longest in the world, at 20,000 pages. What I'm describing here is a massive expansion of the state. I've stayed where I always was politically, and yet it seems to me the jamboree of British politics has moved wildly to the left, and I see, if I may say so, in Kemi Badenoch, the only leader, and I say this as a patriot, someone who cares about this country, who is articulating the true nature of the challenge we face. It's not going to be easy, but I'll say this. It's a number of years before the next election. The point that you made, if I can say this, is absolutely right. I think the Conservatives need to admit that they made significant mistakes, the scale of their own failures. Then I think the public will listen. And the other side, I don't want it to happen, but the other side of a potential bond crisis, our economy is in very severe trouble. I think the public will begin to understand that they need to have realism more than anything else, and the Conservative possibility of winning the next general election will come alive.
OK, well, we'll talk about all of that in more detail in a second. But we've also been speaking to some young Conservatives at the conference about how they think Kemi Badenoch's been doing as leader.
Oh, I would think I would give her a 10.
7.
A 7.
A 6 or 7.
A 9.
I'd actually give Kemi a 10 out of 10.
No matter who had Kemi's job, they would have had a very difficult time, and she has inherited a situation that no party leader would have wanted to.
I think she's taken her time to carefully detail the policies rather than just announcing policies to keep up in the polls.
She's been strong on some things, weaker on others. I just think she needs to be a lot more visible than she has been.
She's been a fantastic leader this year. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better.
I love Kemi Badenoch because she took a stand against gender ideology when no one else did.
You know, we haven't gone and done a lot of things I think a lot of people expect us to do, but I think we're playing the long game.
Some people sort of said we're not quite sure what she stands for, but I think what she stands for is becoming really clear. And she's also a really good speaker as well.
I think you have to stick with Kemi.
I think it's really important for the party that we have a consistent leader throughout.
You know, we've obviously had Boris Johnson, then we've had Rishi Sunak, now we've got Kemi. I think Liz Truss, sorry. Almost missed Liz.
And we don't have infighting and leadership challenges.
If we change it again, it makes us look a bit indecisive.
She has my full support behind her.
Well, let's speak now to Scarlett Maguire, who's a pollster and founder and director of Merlin Strategy. Some positive views there on Kemi Badenoch. Scarlett, do you think that's reflected more broadly? We are just seeing pictures, actually, of Kemi Badenoch preparing and arriving for her speech with her husband there. So how do the public feel about Kemi Badenoch, Scarlett?
She's just not left much of a mark with the public in general. So actually we do see, I did some polling that came out just before this conference started that showed that the Kemi Badenoch performs better than any of the other Conservatives we tried, including James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, even Boris Johnson, against Nigel Farage, although Farage still beats all of them. However, we can see that amongst Conservative members, YouGov came out with some polling that shows that actually, even though a majority of members say she is doing a good job, they still would actually prefer another leader to lead them into the next election. And I think this is part of the problem for Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives, is that it's not just Kemi Badenoch, but there are actually no Conservative figures that are currently cutting through. And when I do focus groups with Conservative voters, even Conservative voters who've left to Reform, I just hear the same thing, which is saying we don't hear from them. We don't really know what they're doing. And I think that is going to be a problem. Look, it's a challenging media environment. Nigel Farage is very, very good at dominating headlines, but still the Conservatives, I think, are going to need to leave a bit of a better mark. Otherwise, they will keep going backwards.
And then that leads me to what about the Conservative Party more broadly in terms of the polling and, you know, where those votes have gone? Presumably, most of them have gone to Reform since the general election.
So look, the Conservatives suffered their worst ever election defeat, and the bad news is they've only gone backwards since then. They've managed to lose another third of their vote since the 2024 election, and the biggest beneficiaries by far have been Reform. At the moment, they're sitting on an average of about 16 or 17 in the polling averages, depending slightly where you look. It will differ from pollster to pollster. But I think there's a worrying trend for the Conservatives, which we can see increasingly. They're falling into not just third place behind Reform and Labour, but potentially fourth place behind the Lib Dems as well. And actually, if you look at the Greens, I wouldn't be surprised that if on current trajectories continue, that they might even be behind the Green Party as well in a year's time.
So is there any cause for optimism at all for the Conservatives?
I think the Conservatives can make a play on the economy. All other parties have sort of deserted that ground. So the Conservatives have regained the lead on who would be best to handle the economy. Now, it's still not much better than when Liz Truss was in charge. It's just that everyone else is faring so much worse. Reform have not made a play for the economy, certainly not a consistent one. And we can see, and especially when I talk to voters in focus groups, that some of the reasons why the voters that are still sticking with the Conservatives, even if they like Farage, even if they like what Farage says about immigration, not all of them do, it's this idea that the Conservatives would be better and more responsible with the economy. So I do think there is an opening there. OK, Scarlett Maguire, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us today.
And Nadeem, obviously the strategy does seem to be, and we're told that Kemi Badenoch will focus on the economy. That seems to be the area that Conservatives think they can make some headway. But isn't there still a massive problem with the legacy that, as you said, you were part of this, that you and your party left?
Yes, of course there is. I mean, as Matthew quite rightly outlined in his very good piece in the Sunday Times, and today as well. But I do think it's an opportunity. I thought Mel Stride did well with articulating where that saving will come from, the 47 billion. I think it's an opportunity because actually reform are not identified with sort of economic strength or discipline, and therefore the space is open.
Do you need to apologise more? That's the other thing Mel Stride
yes,
said,
of course.
didn't he? He talked about apologising
more. And it's a theme through the conference. You heard Rob Jenrick yesterday, albeit tongue-in-cheek, slightly witty. I thought it was an erudite but clever speech with a serious point to be made. But again, was reminding the nation, the conference, that we had an issue around the mini budget and Liz Truss. So all of that begins to allow you the space after you've apologised to say, by the way, I've learned, and here is the real issue, which is to Matthew's point. If you look at where we are today, 134 billion a year in debt servicing, right? It is insane where we're at. And by the way, it may even be more focused in a few weeks' time when France is in a terrible financial crisis, which they're heading towards rapidly. Because if Europe heads to financial crisis, the economy suddenly climbs up ahead of the issue of illegal migration, the boats and everything else. And that's the real opening for Kemi on this. I'm patron of the Adam Smith Institute, and we had our drinks party last night at a conference. I sadly couldn't be there, but Andrew Griffith. So she's got some real strength. She's got Andrew Griffith.
Well,
beginning to cut
we're about
through.
To speak to Andrew Griffith.
There you go. It was standing room only with young people actually talking about financial prudence.
Well, let's let Andrew join the chat. Andrew Griffiths, the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary, joins us from Manchester. We're talking about the task ahead for your party and how difficult it's going to be, and Kemi Badenoch's leadership, of course. What is the strategy, and is Kemi Badenoch the right person to lead your party?
Look, we all know that the road back's going to take time, but the strategy is to focus on things that matter to the electorate, clearly, using our existing long-standing principles, but applying those in terms of policies to things that really matter to people. Right now, people are very, very focused on borders. That's why the start of this conference was about a clear set of plans, and it will take time to show those and communicate those and build trust again on borders. The second half of this conference, including our leader's speech today, very much about the economy. I do think that is the issue of our time. Everybody wants a brighter future for their children and grandchildren. There's a real sense out there, and it's not all on this government, but it's absolutely being amplified with this government, that our country isn't growing more prosperous. We don't have that same optimism of vision about the future we've had in the past.
It's not.
So it's up to us to re-inject that.
It's not all on the present government. Do you think people are willing to listen to you? You're talking about economic competence, fiscal responsibility. Are people really going to believe that after your legacy in government?
Well, look, most of our legacy in government was to take tough decisions on the economy, to reduce the level of the deficit, put the economy in a decent shape so that when that huge speed bump in the road of COVID came along, we were able to protect people. Now, not every single moment was perfect. I have absolutely acknowledged that many times. You've had me on this programme to talk about that. But yes, I do think that we are really the only party that's willing to tell the honest truth, to make those tough decisions. The golden rule that we've announced today will bind our hands to make the difficult decisions on cuts so that we're not continuing to spend beyond our means, live beyond our means as a country. put some of that back into the growth that we all need, because we're only going to get to a more prosperous country, a country that can afford its public services and honour its commitments if you do make those tough decisions, and then have a clear, competent plan for growth. I accept that is going to take time. I accept that's going to take time.
So that, you know, that is the credibility problem, isn't it? You know, you said about cutting debt there. I mean, it went from 65% to 96% under your watch.
Well, look, I think your listeners, your viewers will understand the unprecedented situations of COVID and the pandemic, and that's left a legacy that all politicians need to get to grips with. The difference, I would say, is that we're being honest about that. We're being perfectly honest about making tough, often unpopular decisions. The cuts that we were talking about in welfare, the savings in welfare earlier this week. There'll be more over time about the decisions that a future Conservative government would take. Contrast that with this government, whose budgets have unravelled within months of them being put to the country, and even the most timorous welfare reforms that most of your viewers would think are the right things to do to get the nation's finance in shape, they can't push through, even with a huge majority. So I do think economic competence, it will take time, but we lay out the plans. The next election, I don't think is a particular trust me, I think it's a show me, and we're starting the work of showing people what those plans and decisions will be.
OK, Andrew, stay with us. I'm going to bring in Matthew. You've got your calculator out, I think, haven't you?
I was looking at the... you were right, by the way, the debt to
Thank you.
GDP
I like
ratio,
that.
ChatGPT. So you're absolutely right, it has risen, but it was already quite high after the financial crisis. It was 30% in 2001. But a couple of quick things. I didn't mention in my, I hope, fair indictment of the Conservatives 2010 to 2024, the rise in immigration, failure to stop the boats, the welfare, millions of people of working age who are not in work. I think what the Conservatives should be saying now is, when Edward Heath was a Conservative Prime Minister, he had a whole range of policies that were not that Conservative. Prices and income policy, and a whole range of other things, and it required a very significant correction delivered by another Conservative Prime Minister in the 1980s called Margaret Thatcher. I think if the Conservatives can articulate what went wrong in a convincing way, not try and justify and defend overly, people just aren't listening to that. They immediately think, when we say, oh no, but we tried to stop the boat, but you didn't stop the boats. Oh, but it was difficult with immigration. It went up to insane levels that nobody voted for and destroyed trust in your brand. Much more of that. And then we're going to be in a position, because we have learned from our mistakes, to deliver the correction.
But Andrew's talking about COVID, isn't he? I mean, a lot of that rise in debt was down to COVID.
That's right, but some of it was the energy bailout in 2022. In the 1970s, the oil price spiked fourfold with the OPEC crisis. And left-wing governments, not just right-wing, at the time said, we're going to have to wrap up warmer. We had a $100 billion bailout. And you know what? That sounds great and compassionate, does it not? We're making sure people are looked after. But it means we're in no position to deal with any pathogen or shock or anything else, because we've already reached the limit of our indebtedness. The bond markets won't allow it anymore. And that, I think, goes to the point that Nadeem made. I'm going to be overexcited and passionate here, but in newspapers we made the mistake, I think, of for a while, of doing clickbaity headlines to try and get people to click on. We were optimising our brand. And yet it destroyed the long-term value. The Tories shouldn't be chasing short-term opinion polls. They shouldn't be bothered at all. There could be a bond crisis in France very soon. What's going to happen to Donald Trump? And let's hear from Andrew, because
let's just hear from
he's poised.
We've also heard from one of our viewers in Newbury, Peter, and he's talking about one of your policies, which I think is to cut business rates for high streets. And he's saying, if the Tories cancel business rates for high street retailers, will that affect local council income? Basically, he's saying there's going to be a huge knock-on effect here.
Well, no, local councils don't get to keep the benefit of business rates. But, of course, what will help local councils is having vibrant local economy. The hospitality and retail leisure businesses have been absolutely devastated. They're in a perfect storm. The change in NI thresholds in particular, but also the doubling, more than doubling of effective business rates because of the removal of the relief. So we're going to have to be very selective. It is all about hard choices. I agree with what Matthew was just saying. We've got to be honest about the difficult choices that any government's going to have to make, but particularly the next Conservative government. But this is a very important case. You can't have strong communities. You can't have a strong economy unless you've got strong local high streets. And so that particular measure is focused on that.
Could I ask you about another, what many people would say is a difficult choice? And there are members of your party, William Hague, Tom Tugendhat, who are suggesting this, saying that the triple lock on pensions, which guarantees the rise in state pensions, that it's time that that was got rid of. Is that something you'd consider as part of these hard choices you're talking about?
Well, look, this Parliament's got a long way to run, and ultimately we'll have to put together a manifesto that has all of the different choices we're going to make. Right now, the one that feels to me the most pressing, I hope the government will fix it immediately because it's a stain on all of our moral character, is the million young people who aren't in work, but they're of working age, they've been through the education system, they're not in work. Things like the Labour's unemployment rights bill is going to consign more young people to a life of joblessness. That's a clear and present issue right now. It's not about the long-term future, it's right now. And so I think that, of course, you focus on everything ultimately. We'll put together a balanced budget, a package of measures that will put to the electorate at the next election. But right now, this is a tragedy. We haven't got 4 more years for these young people to wait outside of the workforce. That will have a long-term scarring impact.
OK, I've just got one final question. I know you've got to go, but I just want to ask you about steel, because that news that the EU's steel tariff is likely to go up pretty significantly. What would you do about this? There are some of your political opponents saying it's time to nationalise the industry.
Well, the industry is being nationalised slice by the government already. That of itself doesn't change the economics of making steel in the UK with incredibly high energy costs. You've got to solve energy costs if you're going to have a viable steel business, because so much of the cost card of steel is energy. But secondly, there isn't a future for UK steel if we don't have acceptable access to the EU market. Now, you know, Starmer's made this big pivot towards the EU. He's made a huge number of concessions already. And yet, what is he getting back in return? This is a big issue. It's a failure of statecraft in terms of the EU negotiation.
So you wouldn't step in and help the steel industry?
I'm pleased he's in India, but he needs to come straight back and sort this issue out once he's finished.
But you wouldn't step in and nationalise it? And they're saying, the steel industry is saying, this is an existential crisis.
No pun intended, but we would adopt a much more steely attitude towards the EU. The issue with the EU's negotiation is he's gone into the room having mentally and morally surrendered, and as a result, we're getting a series of really bad outcomes.
The EU would just change their minds, would they?
I think there's a lot of equities that you could play with a proper negotiation with the EU, and my critique of this government is they've surrendered before they get in the room. Their body language is so keen to fetishise everything that comes out of Brussels, giving away our fish for 12 years for tell me what we got in return for that. And now it turns out that he's the wrong side of this debate about steel, really damaging for our industry. And it means there's no viable path. It doesn't matter how much taxpayers' money the government throws at making steel in the UK, with high energy costs and being excluded from acceptable access to the European market, there is no future for steel on this basis in the UK.
OK, Andrew Griffiths, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us today. Nadeem, if I could just pick up on the plan, the Conservative plan for cuts, and talking about welfare cuts, of course, as part of that. But the triple lock, do you think that is now something that has to be looked at, as William Hague, former leader, says?
So I think, if you recall, the triple lock is basically allowing pensioners to get a 2.5% rise no matter what happens, effectively, right? Inflation's running it higher than that at the moment. I think it will be a terrible error to move away from giving pensioners, you know, on par with inflation. I do think there is something you can do. And I think Matthew will correct me if I'm wrong on ChatGPT, but about 25% of the state pension goes to millionaires, pensioners who are wealthy. So I think we can
means test it.
We can easily, if what the machine will say to you is, oh, you can't do that because it's just too complicated to put in place. But look, we did some extraordinary stuff when we vaccinated the nation, right? We can start looking at things in a much cleverer way.
So keep the triple lock.
Using technology.
That means test the state pension.
Keep triple lock. Why would I'm reaching the age of 60, so I've got the next.
Some assessing, there's some incredible to hear.
What's that?
Is it oil of Ulay? What's the explanation?
There are other brands available.
Exactly.
But you know,
Manjaro.
it's interesting you say because the cost of this is about 4 times more than had been anticipated. When I stood in 2001, under Labour, by the way, pensions were rising at the time with prices. And that made it a more containable... I mean, at the moment, if you look at the long-term OBR reports, pensions are going to be, as inevitably, if you have a triple lock, Sunak proposed a quadruple lock at the last election, will eat more and more of the state budget. And in an ageing society, think of the demographics, that is a completely unsustainable proposition. The difficulty is, and I was at the Conservative Party conference on Sunday, I had to get back to London, but I did talk to a few people, and to describe it as an issue of political sensitivity is an understatement. But wasn't that an interesting answer? When Andrew Griffiths was not prepared to rule it out. I mean, I do think this is up for debate. Just one other thing. I think on the energy, or we're going to go and talk about that a bit later, you know, are we a serious country? Are we a serious country? How much collateral you have in a negotiation depends in no small part on your strength. And for years, if not decades, we've been so complacent. Our electricity is the highest price in the world. It has led to deindustrialisation. Why? We have prioritised NIMBYism above the extension of the grid, the nuclear power, the energy, the thermodynamics that could have enabled us to have been and remained a strong power in the world. We've left the EU. Trump is imposing tariffs.
They are trying to do something about that in terms of the nuclear industry.
Too little, too late.
So a simple idea I tried to get across in government is, in France, when you build a new nuclear power station, within a radius around that nuclear power station, all homes got free energy. You got rid of the NIMBYism, right? And I tried to explain that to the machine, the civil service. They said, well, but that sounds like a bribe. It's sort of that mindset that we can't do these sort of things just in case, you know, we fall foul of a headline. We just have to...
You're both really talking about...
I'm passionately agreeing with Matthew. Sometimes in a financial crisis, which we are absolutely in my view, you've got to start thinking much more creatively and explain it to the country. Here's what we're doing.
You're saying that politicians need to be bolder, aren't you? I mean, in terms of...
Why not take... Can I ask a question? I mean, it's so interesting because somebody looking from the outside in, and I know that probably when you're in government there are more constraints than you might imagine, but why not just change the law? I mean, look at I think in China, they get the shovel in the ground to a nuclear power station in 5 years. South Korea, they're building out these extraordinary things. You know, India, these are serious countries that are trying to shape the future. We're obsessed with what happened in our past, you know, colonialism and all the rest of it. It's a remarkable thing. And yet the future is now potentially bright with AI, but that's going to require electricity to power the data centres. It seems to me we need a complete reset in our political psychology, that if you're not prepared to make the difficult decisions that will upset a few local people, I might be one of them, but you consistently veto those projects that are in the national interest. And it means that in a world that is becoming more disruptive, where Trump is trying to use American power to, as it were, bilaterally negotiate with every other country, we're out of the EU, we need that power in order to deliver the trade deals that link us into the markets that can help us to do even better.
But Nadine, you've been in government and, as you said, in many jobs. How do you break through that? Who's at fault here? I mean, you know, the government has talked about changing some of this, ripping up planning laws, you know, starting to build. How do you do it? Where is the block?
So during the pandemic, I saw one part of it when I was brought in to deliver the vaccine programme with some brilliant civil servants. You know, Emily Lawson will forever be, in my view, one of the best of the best. And she then, by the way, perfect example, she got fed up afterwards because she was shunted around number 10 and then cabinet office and then left and went back to the private sector, right? You lose talent. And what you end up with is the machine just shrugging its shoulders going, it's just a bit too complicated. It's too big. You know, the nation at the moment, your viewers think nothing is working properly, right? The NHS doesn't work properly. Their children's education is not working properly. We need that sort of urgency and a mindset that, you know what, if we need, you know, to deliver emergency legislation to change things, whether on energy, let's do it. You know, the Prime Minister should come to Parliament, we're a parliamentary democracy, and say, we're going to do this, and here's why we're doing it.
Let's just have a little look in the hall in Manchester. This is the scene That's not the scene. The scene in Manchester. There it is. Kemi Badenoch about to come out and make her speech. In the meantime, we have Henry Zeffman, our chief political correspondent, who is standing by, waiting for this. Henry, if I can bring you in. A huge challenge, as everyone's talked about, for Kemi Badenoch. How do we think she's going to approach this?
Well, I think we've seen through the week that one of the things that Kemi Badenoch wants to do is unleash much more policy. And I think that is a reflection, though she wouldn't admit this in public, that she probably took a bit too long to just sort of say things after becoming Conservative Party leader almost a year ago. Her pitch on becoming Conservative Party leader was that she wanted to take her time, think things through, and, partly bide her time because she knew that the Conservative Party had just at that point been delivered a massive rebuke by the British public. Yet what she didn't reckon with necessarily was the rise of Reform UK, and that has placed a new onus on her and her team to bring out more policy. We've had a lot of that this week. I think what we'll hear particularly from her today, though, is new policy on the economy. And what's interesting there is she believes and her team believe that there is a potential niche for the Conservative Party there. Not just the sort of standard thing of having the main party of opposition attack the government on its handling of the economy, but also because Reform UK, partly to try to mop up more Labour votes, has moved into a slightly more statist position on the economy than they had before. So Kemi Badenoch, I think, will try in this speech to sort of seize the mantle of the party of fiscal discipline, the party of sound money, but obviously that is complicated, as she will well know, by lingering memories of Liz Truss's handling of the economy, which was obviously a big part of why the Conservatives ended up receiving such a bad electoral verdict from the British public 15 months ago.
And do you think, Henry, having spoken to lots of people there this week, we've heard a lot about empty halls, not many people there, the mood being a bit low. What are you hearing from people about the state of the party?
There's kind of two conferences going on, Vicky. I think the mood among those activists who are here, those party members who are here, I think is pretty good and pretty enthusiastic. They like Kemi Badenoch. They're not necessarily deluded about the scale of the task ahead, but they like what they've heard from her so far. But I say, those activists who are here, it is just, I've been to loads of Conservative Party conferences in Manchester, and it is just noticeably emptier than those previous ones. And part of that, of course, is the inevitability of going from government into opposition. There's fewer corporate exhibitioners here and all of that kind of fluff. That said, I've been to plenty of conferences when the Labour Party were in opposition, and this is definitely flatter and emptier. In fact, it does feel flatter and emptier than last year's Conservative Party conference, which was their first in opposition. But look, I'd say the enthusiasm per capita is pretty good. There just aren't necessarily as many people here as I think Kemi Badenoch would hope. And part of that, by the way, when we talk about the local elections not having been great for the Conservatives in May this year, and fears about the local elections and the devolved elections being bad for the Conservatives next May, that is the Conservative Party. Those councillors are the people who go out and deliver leaflets, who are essentially the sign that the Conservative Party exists beyond its parliamentary ranks. And I think you are seeing a bit of evidence here that it's, so far, pretty depleted.
OK, Henry, thank you very much indeed. We will speak to you again after the speech, no doubt. Just a couple of minutes to go until we think we're going to hear from Kemi Badenoch. And Nadeem, just talk about her leadership. How much support does she have in the party? When there's been rumblings about people looking ahead to next May, really important elections in Scotland and Wales and local elections in England. And everyone looking to see whether the party can progress at that point. Otherwise, they're saying she will be in peril.
So my impression of party conference and just talking to colleagues is that no one has appetite for getting rid of the leader.
Here we are.
There she is.
We are looking at Kemi Badenoch. You're watching Politics Live. This is the Conservative leader making it onto the stage to make her speech to Conservative Party conference there in Manchester. A very warm reception, as you would imagine, for her coming out to make her first speech at conference as Conservative leader. Let's have a listen.
Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Only the Conservative Party can deliver the stronger economy and stronger borders that will give people a more prosperous future. Every generation must face its test. In the 1940s, our test was to defeat fascism and ensure the victory of freedom. In the 1980s, it was to banish socialism and deliver prosperity. And in the 2020s, our test is to restore a strong economy, secure our borders, and rebuild Britain's strength so our children inherit a country that works. Ladies and gentlemen, conference, thank you. Thank you for standing by the only party that can meet the test of our generation. The only party that can deliver a stronger economy and stronger borders. Everything else relies on getting this right. National security, order on the streets, decent healthcare, high-quality education, cohesion in our communities. None of this exists without a strong economy and strong borders. A weak economy makes us poorer. The services we rely on get worse, and people cannot build a better life for themselves or their families. Weak borders allow people to exploit our generosity, put our housing and public services under pressure, and fracture our sense of who we are as a nation. A weak economy and weak borders means steady decline. I reject that fate. Together, we Conservatives will save Britain from that fate. And we can do it together because we are a strong team. My fantastic shadow cabinet, Mel, Chris, Claire, Laura, Rob, Andrew, both of them, James, both of them, Mims, Jessie Stewart, all of you, thank you. Thank you so much. My front bench, experienced hands and rising stars, conference, we know our MPs and peers have more collective wisdom than the rest of Parliament put together. And it's not just them. Let's not forget Darren and our MSs in Wales, Russells, and our MSPs in Scotland, our fantastic mayors. Labour beater, Ben Houchin, Reform slayer, Paul Bristow, councillors, activists, you are our party, thank you. I joined our party as an activist 20 years ago. I was with you delivering leaflets, knocking on doors. I sat in this hall listening to speeches. I celebrated all our wins, and I felt the pain of every defeat. I cannot tell you now how honored, how privileged, and how proud I am to stand before you as leader of our party, leader of the Conservative Party, the only party that can meet the test of our generation. And you are more than just a political party to me. You have supported me, you have stood by me, you have enabled me to achieve more than I ever dreamed. You are my family, in many ways, quite literally. I married the deputy chairman of my association. And I certainly would not be standing here today without my husband, Hamish. Thank you, Hal. I love this party for what it has given me. But more than that, I love it because it has made life better for so many in our country and will do so again. Time and time again, guided by our values and our principles, we have steered this country through its darkest days. And today, we must be ready to do the same again. Because we are the only party that has the vision, the courage, and the competence to tear up a broken political model, deliver a new blueprint for our country, and together take Britain into an era of prosperity and security. To do this conference, we must be frank about the problems our country faces, because they are not the same ones that we faced in the 1940s or the 1980s or even the 2010s. The country that Hamish and I were born in had its issues, but thanks in large part to hard choices taken by this party, opportunity was there for people who worked hard. People had a sense of pride in our national story and excitement about the future. I'm not so sure young people feel that way anymore. They feel they are living somewhere where things never get any better. Britain is stagnating while the world around us moves on. We are competing with restless and ambitious countries around the world. We are competing with 1 billion people in India striving to become middle class. We are competing with economic success stories like Poland. 15 years ago, Polish workers came here to find opportunity. Now, Poland is growing twice as fast as we are. While Britain was redefining what a woman is, China was building 5 nuclear reactors. Conference people around the world are determined to lift their lives and their children's lives up to a standard that we have taken for granted. Some countries won't be able to do this, and in those countries, millions of people will decide that they want to come here instead. And if our borders are not secure, they will succeed, especially if our economy is addicted to migration. Of course, we want brilliant minds and great talents to come here, but at the moment, we are not just taking in doctors and engineers and scientists. We are accepting hundreds of thousands of people, some with many dependents, some with no skills at all. This broken immigration model is heaping pressure on our public sector, a public sector which already, every year, demands more and more and more of our money. Yet services don't get better, they get worse. Everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about. We have all felt it. We used to ring up our GP and get an appointment the same day. Now we have to wait on the phone to see if we're one of the lucky ones. We have potholes that have been around for so long, people are holding birthday parties for them. But underneath all of this is a society which is struggling to cope with the reality of getting poorer, struggling to cope with the erosion of a sense of who we are as a country. We cannot drift our way into solving these problems. We know what drift looks like. It looks like allowing the trade unions to overturn years of progress in school standards. It looks like letting our veterans face vexatious prosecutions when we should be worrying about the strength of our military. Drift looks like Labour's one-in, one-out returns deal with France that ends up letting 100 people in for every one who leaves. Being timid will get us nowhere. We need bold ideas. We need a positive vision for this country and a plan to deliver it. We need a new approach a new approach that delivers a stronger economy and stronger borders. We owe that to our children. During our time in government, we did great things. Labour want to pretend the last 14 years were all bad. They want to forget that they were losing all that time. Let's remind them. Between 2010 and 2020, we slashed the deficit. We lifted millions of people out of tax and got millions into work. We sent English schools soaring up the international league tables. We led the coalition against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The conference, the truth is, we didn't always fight hard enough for what we believed in. We need to remember who we are fighting for. We are fighting for people who work hard and do the right thing. We are fighting for people who ask, why do sickness benefits pay more than the minimum wage, more than the living wage even? We are fighting for small business owners, people who take risks and get things done. We are fighting for the victims of crime. They want to know that we are on their side, that criminals will face the full force of the law. We are fighting for the farmers, putting food on our tables. These are our people, conference. They are the backbone of our country. We fought for them before, and we will fight for them again. Conference, time and time again, we have been the only party that is bold enough to do what is needed, the only party that is competent enough to do it properly. We were bold enough to create the modern police force, to introduce free state education for every child. We were radical enough to launch the right to buy, to free the workplace from the dead hand of the state, to give working men the vote, and better late than never, women too. We were courageous enough to introduce same-sex marriage. And of course, we were brave enough to take Britain out of the European Union, honoring the biggest democratic mandate in our history. All Conservative achievements. Yes, all of that was us. But enough about past glories. Actually, how about one more? Conference, do you know the one thing we Conservatives have done the most throughout our history? Clear up the mess left by Labour. And my goodness, they are making one hell of a mess. Never in the field of human history have so many been let down by so few. All they have delivered is a doom loop of higher taxes, weaker borders, and month after month of chaos. They had a plan to win, but no plan for power, no vision for Britain. They know how to make promises, but not how to deliver them. This year, the Prime Minister was asked to name his best moment in office. Do you know what he said? Walking into Downing Street. For once, I agree with him. It's been downhill all the way since. What have Labour given us? An anti-corruption minister under investigation for corruption, a homelessness minister who made her own tenants homeless, a housing secretary sacked for dodging housing taxes. You couldn't make this stuff up. We had a transport secretary fired for stealing a phone, and our ambassador in Washington thrown out in disgrace. There is an old joke that a diplomat is someone sent abroad to lie for their country. Well, at least in Peter Mandelson, they had a man of experience. Just look at the spectacle we saw in Liverpool last week. Minister after minister failing to rule out the tax rises we all know are coming. The mayor of Manchester touting his own manifesto for the country. But to be honest, I can't blame Andy Burnham for that one. Who doesn't want to get rid of this utterly useless, weak Prime Minister? After 5 years as Labour leader, people still don't know what Keir Starmer stands for. And you know what the real problem is? He doesn't know himself. Today we learn that Labour deliberately collapsed the trial of 2 men accused of spying on MPs for China because the Prime Minister wants to suck up to Beijing. This is squalid. We have got the measure of them, conference. Just look at Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary. She's trying to convince us that she's tough, right? I remember when Shabana Mahmood tried to stop foreign criminals being deported. Do you remember that, Rob? I remember when she lay down on the ground in front of a Sainsbury's protesting because they were selling food from Israel. So forgive me if I treat this newfound tough image with a little skepticism. You remember. Labour represents everything that is wrong with politics. Rachel Reeves likes to congratulate herself for breaking the glass ceiling. What she's really broken is our economy. Attacking those who work hard, destroying business confidence, forcing wealth creators to leave the country, piling debt onto our children. We know that in her November budget of doom, she will give us all something to cry about. The highest business taxes since the 1970s, taxes on farmers, taxes on education, an unprecedented tax, punishing parents who work hard to invest in their children's future. Shameful. The tax burden is so high, it is making Britain poorer because business is giving up. Business is leaving. And as they leave, or never start in the first place, people's livelihoods, people's hopes, people's dreams go with them. Grangemouth Refinery, gone. Merck, BMW, Ineos, pulling investment. Schools for children with special needs are shutting their doors. Farmers feeling they've got no way out. The London Stock Exchange dropping out of the world's top 20 for listings. Our party knows that a job is the best route out of poverty. We got unemployment to a 40-year low. And what has happened since Labour came in? A jobs tax, unemployment up, inflation up, borrowing up. These are the real-life consequences of a weak, directionless government. Conference, last year, the public voted for change, but all they have been given is change for the worse. And because they are still angry with us, parties that in normal times would never be seen as a serious option for government are gaining ground, making promises they will never be able to keep. Let's look at what's on offer out there for all those disappointed by Labour. Reform promising free beer tomorrow, Jeremy Corbyn promising free jam, Lib Dems promising free lentils. All of them promising more spending, blowing up the public finances. Whether it's Starmer, Farage, Corbyn or Davey, all these men are shaking the same magic money tree. Following the same failed playbook, no plan for growth, no honesty about the scale of the challenges, and it always leads to the same result. More government, more taxes, more debt. It is irresponsible, it's cynical, and it's why Britain needs Conservatives back in charge. But we can't beat them simply by attacking them. As George Bernard Shaw said, never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. We have to offer something better. So what are we going to do? Conference, as you may have heard, I am an engineer. My starting point is always to carry out a diagnosis before producing the blueprint to put it right. Since I became your leader, my shadow cabinet and I have analysed the problems facing the country. Our diagnosis is clear. Britain is being held back by a broken model. A model which says the government always knows best, that high immigration is always good for the economy, that Britain should apologise for its history rather than be proud of it. We lost because we accepted the status quo no more. When Margaret Thatcher was leader of the opposition, she said this: if every Labour government is prepared to reverse every Tory measure, while Conservative governments accept nearly all socialist measures, the end result is only too plain. She was right. To fix our country, we must reverse Labour's measures. So, we will cancel their vindictive tax on education. Vicky knows what's coming. We will scrap their tax on family farms. Andrew, we will scrap their tax on family businesses. And we will reverse the terrible measures in Angela Rayner's unemployment bill, written by the unions for the unions, a bill that will wrap firms in red tape, cost business £5 billion, and make Angela Rayner probably one of the last people in Britain to ever be legally sacked. The conference simply unwinding Labour's measures isn't enough. We are Conservatives, not anarchists. I am an engineer, not an arsonist. So together, thank you. So together, we are going to build something better. We are creating a blueprint for Britain, a new settlement based on Conservative values. So what's in it? First, securing our borders. On Sunday, I announced our plan to take the UK out of the ECHR, to scrap the Human Rights Act, to deport 150,000 illegal immigrants. This is a plan, not a slogan. Next in my blueprint, work and welfare. If we want to end our over-reliance on immigration, then we must make sure that every British citizen who can work does work. Right now, there are 6.5 million working age adults claiming benefits instead of working. You heard me right, 6.5 million. That is the entire population of Cardiff and Belfast and Glasgow and Manchester combined, being paid to sit at home all day. We cannot expect people to get up and go to work and pay more and more in taxes to subsidize millions of others not to work. It should not be controversial to say this. Conference, we have done the hard work, and we have a plan to cut welfare spending. First, British benefits for British citizens. It is common sense that you should not draw out of a system that you haven't paid into. Second, we will restrict benefits to those with the more severe mental health conditions, not anxiety or mild depression. Yes, these challenges are real and people should get support, but they cannot be treated as a reason for a lifetime off work. And third, we will restrict motability vehicles to people with serious disabilities. Those cars are not for people with ADHD. These are the first steps of a radical reform of our welfare system. We will return it to its founding principle, that support only goes to those that really need it. This should be common sense, but only the Conservatives understand this. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, the Nationalists, and Reform are all demanding more welfare spending. They don't care that it's not fair, but we do. After COVID, 2,000 people a day were being signed onto out-of-work sickness benefits. It is a national tragedy that in just 1 year of Labour, the latest figure has more than doubled. 5,000 new people are signing on each and every single day. Many are young people who are losing the chance to make something of themselves, never knowing what it's like to pay their own way. This isn't just about saving money, important though that is. It's far more than that. It is driven by our deep Conservative conviction that work is a good in itself. And as people work, as they strive, as they provide for themselves and their families, they should not pay more and more of their money in taxes to a state that provides less and less. So fixing the state is next in our blueprint. Since Brexit and COVID, the size of the civil service has swollen by over a third. There are now more than 500,000 civil servants. And have you noticed? Is government working a third better for you? I don't think so. So we are going to reverse this. We are going to cut the civil service back to where it was in 2016. And as Conservatives, we don't just believe in reducing the size of the state. I have always said that while government should do less, what it does, it should do well. Let me give you an example. Conservatives are proud of our police. Unlike Labour, we will always have their back. But security and prosperity cannot exist in a country where the law is mocked, where crime is ignored, and where criminals laugh at justice. Right now, tens of thousands of police hours are wasted every year on non-crime hate incidents and form filling, officers chasing tweets instead of thieves. The Shadow Justice Secretary is stopping more fare evaders than Transport for London. Thank you, Rob. Conference, we are going to free the police to protect the public, not to chase political correctness. Right now, our police are spending 800,000 hours every single year waiting with mental health patients. 800,000 hours. That's the equivalent of 400 police officers doing nothing else all year except waiting around. No more. Every single officer we free from pointless paperwork, we will put back on our streets. We will send them after the shoplifters, making life a misery for high streets. And we will triple stop and search, because the more people we stop, the more people we search, the more knives we take off the streets. Across public services, we are developing similarly detailed plans to make things work better. In the NHS, industrial action has kept waiting lists high for far too long. Enough is enough. We will ban doctors from going on strike. In education, Labour have bent over to the teaching unions and are removing our academy freedoms, which have been so successful. We will reverse this act of educational vandalism, and we will make sure that brilliant schools and teachers have the freedom to do what they do best: teach. Because education should be how people change their lives. It should help you develop the skills you need to get on in life. It should ensure you get the job you want. So, if your name's Rachel, you can be an economist instead of working in customer complaints. And speaking of customer complaints, let's talk about university. Every year, thousands of young people go off to university, but leave with crippling debt and no real prospects. Nearly 1 in 3 graduates see no economic return. And every year, taxpayers write off over £7 billion in unpaid student loans. Wasted money, wasted talent. That's every year. A rigged system propping up low-quality courses while people can't get high-quality apprenticeships that lead to real jobs. And this is personal for me. I did 2 degrees, one in engineering, one in law. But I also had an apprenticeship first. And while I can't remember how to do parallel integration, I can remember how to fix a broken computer, which I learned to do during my apprenticeship. I was working with adults, I was paying my own way, and it gave an 18-year-old me a self-confidence that my university degrees never did. And unlike my degrees, I wasn't left with any debt. So we will shut down rip-off courses and use the money to double the apprenticeship budget. We'll be giving thousands more young people the chance of a proper start in life, just like I had. Which brings me, Conference, to the most important task that we will face and the centerpiece of our blueprint. The reason why the Conservative Party is the only party in Britain who can be trusted to meet the test of our generation is that none of this works without a strong economy. Securing our borders, getting people into work, policing our streets, defending the nation, none of it is possible without the money to pay for it. And we are the only party with a plan to get our economy back on track. It starts with fiscal responsibility. We have to get the deficit down. And we must also show how every tax cut or spending increase is paid for. So today, I am introducing a new golden economic rule. Every pound we save will be put to work. At least half will go towards cutting the deficit, because living within our means is our first priority. And with the rest, we will get Britain growing and bring down the taxes that are stifling our economy. Over the next decade, Rachel Reeves is going to double the deficit with her borrowing and tax doom loop. She is stealing from our children and grandchildren, and Conservatives will put an end to it. We will always explain upfront where we will make these savings. We're not going to do what Labour did, promise not to cut public spending, only to snatch away pensioners' winter fuel payments. We are doing things differently. Thanks to the hard work of the Shadow Cabinet, we have already identified £47 billion in savings. Pretty has earmarked £7 billion from the overseas aid budget. Alex has identified £8 billion from cutting the civil service. And Helen has found £23 billion from welfare. Under our golden rule, half of those savings will go towards reducing Labour's deficit. With the rest, we are going to unleash our economy. That's the Conservative way. Responsibility today, opportunity tomorrow. Like so many young people, all of my first jobs were on the high street. Yes, in McDonald's. Have I ever mentioned that? But it wasn't just me. All of my friends were doing similar jobs. Cafes, local pubs, family-run shops, the places that make our high streets what they are. The shops and businesses essential to communities in every town and village. And so on Monday, you heard Mel make our commitment to abolish their business rates. So whether you're a councillor, a mayoral candidate, a campaigner, I want you to go out there and spread the word that the Conservatives are bringing back the high street. Conference, energy is growth. It always has been, and it always will be. Countries with cheap energy grow faster. Countries with expensive energy decline. Right now, we pay 4 times what industry in the US does for electricity. The result? We are deindustrializing. It's not just manufacturing that is disappearing, not just steel, not just chemicals, not just ceramics, not just oil and gas. We are losing our farming industry. We are losing our fishing industry. These are the foundations of a strong economy, and they are going all because we chose a slogan of net zero over a serious strategy for a stronger economy and a better environment. So I am saying enough. I am reversing this. We will get rid of the Climate Change Act and replace it with a proper strategy that actually works. A strategy which protects the natural environment and the landscapes we love. A strategy that takes sensible steps to tackle climate change without bankrupting ourselves in the process. We will cut bills for families, slash costs for businesses, end the madness that you have to tear out your boiler or disconnect your gas hob. We are going to bring industry and jobs back home. This is real action, conference, not slogans. Conference, I'm not a climate change skeptic, but I am a net zero skeptic. Britain has already done more than any major country to cut emissions. But we cannot have a law which will make this country poorer while creating jobs abroad and increasing our reliance on hostile states. So we will axe the carbon tax on electricity. We will scrap Labour's wind and solar levy, and instead we will give you our cheap power plan. Through this plan, we will cut bills by £165 for the average family, nearly £5,000 for the average restaurant, and over £1,100 for the average pub. These are savings that can be passed on to consumers. So, conference, I won't promise you free beer, but I do want you all to have cheaper beer. So now it is time to put British prosperity first. Give this country the cheap, reliable energy it needs to thrive again. Backing nuclear, but also recognizing that it is pure folly to ban new oil and gas extraction while paying to import resources that Norway takes from the very same basin. So when it comes to the North Sea, we have a very simple policy. Drill our oil and gas now. Conference, you have seen it out there in the fringes all over Manchester, that this is a party fizzing with ideas, building our policy programme, setting out our plans, a tax cut for our high streets, a helping hand for the young with our first jobs bonus, reforms to welfare, 10,000 new police officers, tripling stop and search, scrapping the sentencing council, a new removals force, improving behaviour in schools, doubling apprenticeships, support for our veterans, £165 off your electricity bills, drilling in the North Sea, an end to the energy profits levy, scrapping the family farm tax, scrapping the family business tax, scrapping VAT on school fees, out to the ECHR, a plan for our borders, a plan for a stronger economy. Thank you. And conference, because of all the savings we found and costed, because of the tough decisions on what the government shouldn't do, because of our golden economic rule, we can afford to make one more announcement. As the Conservative Party, we know who our people are. They are people who work hard. They are the people who save hard. They are the people who understand the importance of putting down roots. They are the people who make sacrifices today for a better life tomorrow. They do the right thing. Our people are the Brits who want to get ahead in life. At the heart of a conservative Britain is a country where people who wish to own their own home can. I remember the joy when I got the first set of keys to my first flat, the excitement of opening my own front door for the very first time, the smell of the fresh paint. I remember it just like yesterday. I want everyone in our country to have that feeling, to know it's your place, your house, your home. We Conservatives believe that owning your own home gives you a real stake in society, roots in your community. But our housing market is not working as it should. There is a big barrier that keeps getting in the way. That barrier, Conference, is the tax you have to pay when you buy your home. I haven't even said what it is yet, but you all know. You all know that that barrier is stamp duty. Young people trapped in the pain of renting, workers who want to further their career, pensioners who want to downsize but can't afford the thousands of pounds they have to pay in tax. Conference, stamp duty is a bad tax. It is an unconservative tax. The last Conservative government cut stamp duty for thousands of home buyers. But now we must go further. We must free up our housing market, because a society where no one can afford to buy or move is a society where social mobility is dead. So I have looked at the stamp duty thresholds to see where we can change them. I have looked at the rates you have to pay to see if we can lower them. I have decided that we can't, because that simply wouldn't be enough. Conference, the next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty on your home. It'll be gone. I thought you'd like that one. Thank you. Thank you. That is how we will help achieve the dream of home ownership for millions. Home ownership should be a dream that's open to everyone. Abolishing stamp duty on your home is a key to unlock a fairer and more aspirational society. We cannot unpick every tax. The debt, the deficit, and the damage this Labour government is creating means we cannot do everything all at once. Scrapping stamp duty will benefit people of all ages, because conservatism must speak to all generations. The young professional buying their first flat, the couple looking for somewhere to bring up their first baby, the growing family hunting for their forever home, the pensioner who wants somewhere a little smaller or maybe to move nearer the grandchildren. No longer will they be punished with a tax that is a barrier to doing the right thing for them, for their family, and for society. Thank you. And this change will bring wider benefits to our economy too. Because every time a home is sold, it triggers a chain reaction of activity. Movers, builders, decorators, flat pack furniture, and DIY. Trips to Next, John Lewis, and IKEA. And I can afford to do this while still leaving space within my golden economic rule, because that's the fiscally prudent way to do things. That's what Conservatives do. Conference, I want to see a better Britain, where people have a brighter and more prosperous future. The Labour Party fails when it follows its principles. We fail when we don't follow ours. We are going to follow the same timeless conservative principles which have led us to success in the past. Personal responsibility, free enterprise, family, freedom of speech. People want to know what I stand for? I stand for a government that takes less of your money and doesn't interfere in your life, where the state does less but does it better, where those who create wealth are welcomed with open arms, not driven from our shores, where reward matches effort, where Britain stands tall in the world. I stand for an economy where profit is not a dirty word, where enterprise is supported, not crushed. I stand for a country where what you put in determines what you get out, where excellence is celebrated. I stand for a country where actions have consequences, where we talk about responsibilities as well as rights, where crime is punished and justice is served, where the welfare of victims outweighs the welfare of criminals. I stand for a society where free speech trumps hurt feelings, where everyone knows what a woman is, where people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, where the vulnerable are supported, but where freeloaders are told where to get off. Conference, I stand for stronger borders and a stronger economy so that the young can fulfill their potential, the old can live out their years in dignity, and everyone can achieve their dreams to own a home, run a business, raise a family. This is the Britain I stand for. If it is the Britain you stand for, then stand with me and let's build it together.
And that was Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, making her conference speech, getting a rapturous reception in the hall, as you might imagine. She made a defence of past Conservative governments and insisted that the party today was fizzing with ideas. She made a surprise announcement saying that her party, if returned to government, would scrap stamp duty in England and Northern Ireland. She also promised to reduce borrowing. She said that she would bring a new settlement to the country, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, deporting 150,000 illegal migrants, restricting benefits and cutting the civil service. We can see her there, joined on the stage by her husband, Hamish, and she will make her way off now as the audience applauds, and we will get reaction, of course, to that speech, starting with my guests in the studio. Nadeem Sahawi, what do you make of what she had to say? Actually, a lot of policy announcements have been made today and in the last few days, which wasn't what she was originally intending to do when she became leader.
Well, I thought she took her time, and I think most of the party felt the same way and left sort of summer vacant for sort of Reformer Nigel to dominate the headlines. But I think that speech has addressed that issue and more. It's smart economics. Smart economics is smart politics, ultimately. And I think tomorrow's headlines, and I suspect up to the budget, will add to the pressure on Rachel Reeves. Stamp duty, land tax, is a terrible tax, and that was a very smart move. Don't tinker. Don't try and create different bands and play with it, because people don't get it. They've done the work, and it's complete abolition. That's a very, very clever economic move. It also speaks to what we discussed earlier, which is that reform's only real advantage is stopping the boat's immigration. if you look at the polling, and they've left the space of the economy less clear. You know, I suspect if you conduct a focus group or a survey today, people don't really get where reform is at on the economy.
So, Matthew, if there's a gap there...
So it's a smart idea.
If there's a gap there on the economy, but does the Conservative Party, and you've recently joined it, does it have the credibility? And she talked about, we are competent enough to change things. There'll be lots of people saying, come on, the last Conservative government, the last thing it was competent.
Well, I mean, I joined the Conservative Party, but I still see myself first and foremost as an objective journalist, if I may say so. Yes, I think the public does feel that way, and I think the public's right to feel that way. Good speech, I thought. I couldn't agree more about stamp duty. Speak to any economist about the worst and most inefficient tax. It's stamp duty. It obfuscates mobility of labour, where people can go to the jobs where their skills are most suited. And it was a terrible mistake. I think when I bought my first property, Kemi talked about buying her first home and going out. I remember my first flat when I bought it. Stamp duty back then, do you know what it was?
Go on.
0.5 of 1%.
That's right.
And what is it now? It's just gone up and up and up. And I think that's been a disaster. So what the public will take, two things I think they'll take. One, the stamp duty reform. But the second thing on the economy, they need to be convinced that the cuts to welfare and the other budgets that she mentioned are credible, and therefore this can be done without it seeming like a giveaway. That's the absolutely important synthesis in this message. And you mentioned reform and Farage. I think the public is seeing somebody who has socialist tendencies. He wants to nationalise the commanding heights of the British economy. He wants to get rid of the two-child limit on welfare and a number of other giveaways that I think the public feels are non-credible and that will take us into more danger. I think the Conservative Party need to emphasise this. They need to push it. The economy will be the top priority at the next election, with one big caveat. So long as, and this is a very large caveat, Labour get on top of the small boats and start to cut immigration. It actually would help the Conservatives, would it not, in electoral terms, if Labour dealt with that so that the focus can be on the economy at the time of the next election.
OK, we are going to just cross back to Manchester because our political correspondent, Harry Farley, is there and he has some people to talk to give their reaction to the speech. Harry.
Vicky, we have three Conservative Party members who have just come out of the hall to that rapturous reception that Kemi Badenoch got. I'm joined by Ellie from County Durham, Nathaniel from Hertsmere and Natalie from the Vale of Glamorgan. Ellie, let's start with you. You're from a part of the country that the Conservatives need to win and to win back. How do you think that speech would have gone down in the areas that you are hoping to represent?
I think it's absolutely really exciting news. I think, you know, we've got some foundations now that we can build on. We're on the right path. I think, you know, the big announcement about abolishing stamp duty is going to help a lot of young people. It's going to help people who want to build their families. It's going to, you know, it's just fantastic news. I think that is something that's going to boost our economy. It's just so exciting for everyone. And I think to be here at that conference, to be part of that big announcement was just something quite special. You know, there was a big feel of there being, what's the right word? It was very united today. You know, I think the Conservatives have done so. We've been in power for 14 years. We didn't do best in the general election and the council elections, and we're losing seats. But I think this is the time where we've got that foundation and we're building.
Ellie, thank you very much. Nathaniel, let me ask your thoughts. One of the questions hovering over this conference, I suppose, has been Reform UK, the threat to Nigel Farage and the existential threat that poses to this party. Do you think that Kemi Badenoch has done enough to, I suppose, hold on to the leadership for now?
Yeah, so I think Kemi's won the leadership contest quite convincingly amongst members last year. I think the members are still quite happy with her as leader. I think the policies that have been announced over the last few days, so around the ECHR, around abolishing stamp duty, around £5,000 national insurance rebate for people buying their first home, I think those have gone down very well with the membership. When you hear them, when you hear the applause that she's received, or when you talk to members on the conference floor, I think they've been really pleased with those announcements. There has been some difficulties in reform. Obviously the party is challenging and there is a bit of a fight on the right, but I think that Kemi's put out a good stall that gives Conservative members something to talk about.
Would you be ever tempted to join Nigel Farage in Reform UK?
No, certainly not for me.
Okay, thank you very much. Natalie from the Vale of Glamorgan, obviously in Wales, big elections coming up next year, and you've got Oakley here as well, I think. Is that right?
She's my in training support dog because I think I have long COVID, so she keeps me safe.
I'm sorry to hear that. Natalie, tell me your thoughts on that speech, and particularly whether you think it will try and help revive the Conservatives' chances in your part of Wales.
First of all, this is my first ever conference of any political party, and I have to say that I've been very impressed and very informed with regards to what the party is trying to do. Secondly, I think that Kemi has done her absolute best at rousing the enthusiasm amongst her supporters, which is what this whole event is about. But I think there's something missing in all of this, and that's all of the work she's been doing behind the scenes with the process, the renewal process that I've been engaged in since she won leadership. And I think it's very poor form to chop and change leaders. As a military veteran, I believe we have to be loyal to our leadership, because it's through that loyalty and cohesively that we have a better chance of winning the public over, because they'll believe that we are committed and authentic and passionate about making our united Britain stronger. And having a united Britain, again, is really important. I'm a Scot living in Wales. I'm married to a beautiful Welshman. My children were born in England. I don't want discord, hate, discordance in this country. I think the Conservative Party is the only one that can offer us unity.
Natalie, thank you very much. Well, that's pretty much it from us at the Conservative Party conference. As you heard, support from those in the room. This conference has been an attempt to define the Conservatives against both and Reform UK on the other. From shadow cabinet ministers that I've been speaking to, they seem relatively happy with how it has gone, but there's illusions here. The challenge still facing this ancient party.
Thank you very much, Harry. Apologies there for a slight glitch on the sound at the end, but we did hear from all of your guests. We can now speak to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Richard Fuller, who joins us. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Can we just look at some of the numbers? Obviously, that eye-catching announcement of scrapping stamp duty in England and Northern Ireland. Now, last year, that raised £11.6 billion. You're promising, I think, £47 billion of spending cuts. Do you think that the public might be a little bit sceptical? You've found all these cuts that you obviously didn't make when you were in power.
Well, I think, obviously, the Labour Party coming in has splurged on public spending. We've had a massive increase in public spending since Rachel Reeves took the reins at number 11. And they haven't made the sorts of steps forward in terms of productivity improvement that we would have made if we were in office. So, no, I think what Kemi Badenoch, which was a pretty astonishingly good speech today, said was that her golden economic rule was to make sure that our first priority is to reduce the deficit, but also then to find space for tax cuts. And if you talk to anyone who has detailed knowledge about taxes, they always point to the inefficiencies of this particular tax, and particularly its impact on people trying to buy their first home.
But is it affordable? And if you've talked about, as you have, debt and how much that is costing in the government's interest repayments, would you not be better off using all of these savings you say you can find to reduce that first?
Well, I think the vast majority of the spending reductions that have been announced so far will be used to reduce the deficit. But we also have to understand, if you want to reduce the deficit, there are also things that the government should be doing to unleash the private sector to create wealth, to create incomes for people. And in particular, the issue of social mobility and mobility around the country. The stamp duty on homes is a real inhibitor for people to be able to move from one place to another, to maybe improve the job they've got or to relocate their family. And Kemi today was very, very clear that there is space for this particular tax cut, but her priority, her golden rule, remains laser focused on the deficit and deficit reduction.
And when it comes to the cuts to welfare, I think it's over £20 billion that you're hoping to find. Where are you going to get those from? Who are you going to get those from?
Well, part of that is restricting access to benefits to British citizens. Part of that is looking at what's happened, particularly since COVID, in terms of anxiety and some of those sort of perhaps less severe mental health issues, and say what we need to do there is give people assistance, medical help, so they can get through those those illnesses. They are real, but they don't need to see that as a basis for having benefits rather than working. And that provides quite a substantial part of the overall 23 billion. There'll be other changes as well within welfare.
Have you been forced into making these policy announcements because of the threat from Reform UK? Because when Kemi Badenoch became leader, she said she was going to wait for more than a year before she started bringing forward policies, because the election is, of course, still some way off.
No, I think Kemi sets her own timetable. You could get a glimpse today of the strength of her character, the strength of her purpose. We see that in the shadow cabinet all the time, and she has been very clear with all the cabinet colleagues over the last year to be very sensible in coming forward with plans, new ideas, learning from some of the mistakes when we're in office, but also building on some of the successes whilst we were in office and coming up with plans. And what you've seen over the last few days, not only with Kemi's speech today, but also the announcements by my colleague Mel Stride and by Chris Philp and others over the last few days, is the fruit of that work over the last year. This is the Conservative Party starting to lay out its agenda, the things that we will do at the next election.
And can I just put to you a comment we've had from Pete, who's got in touch, from Chelmsford. And he says he does agree with the Conservative leader's budgetary sentiments, but he points out there was no mention of defence in that speech. He says we need a much bigger army and a defence budget with at least 5% of GDP available to spend. What do you say to that? And why was there no mention of defence in the speech?
We've already made our commitments on defence expenditure to 3%, and we'll be, as I say, this is just the starter for 10 really on Conservatives laying out policies. The next election is 3-4 years away from us, and so there's plenty of work that we will be doing in areas, including in defence, building up some of the policy announcements that James Cartledge, my colleague, the Shadow Defence Secretary,
So do you think it should be 5%? Should it be 5%?
All of these decisions have to be looked at in the round. It is important that we stick by our rule, that we want to see the size of the states come down. We want the state to do fewer things, but make sure when it does those things, they do those things better. And that's part of the answer to your viewer about defence, because one of the critical things that the government has to do for all of our safety, all of our security, and Kemi was clear about it, secure borders, stronger borders, is our defence budget. And the Conservative Party can be relied upon as we prepare for the next government to make sure that our armed forces have the money they need, and importantly, that our veterans are protected.
OK, stay with us. Matthew, I just want to bring you in there. I mean, you talked before the speech about the amount of spending, public spending, and how much that has increased over the decades. Do you think these plans are fiscally credible? Because it all hangs on that, doesn't it, for the Conservatives?
That question you asked, if I may say so, on defence was absolutely seminal. There's war in Europe. Civil war could be about to overtake Syria. Iran is looking for an opportunity for the world to be distracted, to continue to enrich uranium. And the real big strategic question in the world at the moment is, why is China not blockading Taiwan? Absolutely crucial strategically because of its position in the production of advanced semiconductors. And they're waiting. And the West is stretched. The commitment to get to 3.5 to 5% of GDP that Trump imposed on NATO, that has free-ridden for decades, we're not going to get there for years. And our production of munitions is not capable, I don't think, of prevent. I think the reason China's waiting is it thinks its moment of maximum advantage is still to come. Our moral seriousness is determined in part by our ability to spend on defence, and that, as you say, to come to the answer, it's crucial that they can outline a way of bringing down those welfare benefits that makes the commitment to our military expenditure credible. That's important for people, our enemies, looking around the world.
Nadeem, are the welfare cuts, is that credible, do you think?
I think so. I think, look, things like claiming for anxiety, I think you're right to get help, but not necessarily get the welfare that goes with it. Mobility has become a giant scam, effectively. So I think that what you saw there, probably one of the most powerful things, is she's got a real team. And again, that must be coming through all of her research work that she's done to demonstrate that, yes, we've learned from our mistakes, but actually we've got a plan. And she's playing the long game because it's 3.5 years to go, maybe 4 years, right? All sorts of things can happen, but I think she's right to bet on the economy.
OK. Our thanks to Richard Fuller there in Manchester. Thank you for talking to us today. That's all for today. A big thank you to Nadeem Sahawi and Matthew Syed for being with me throughout the speech. I will be back tomorrow with more Politics Live at 12:15 here on BBC Two and iPlayer.